Have you ever seen your mom suddenly unable to stand up straight one day? Or maybe your grandma, sitting in her chair for hours, unable to bend down and tie her own shoes. Most people assume it's just age, but that's not always the case. I still remember that morning when Mrs. Maria, a woman in her early 60s, walked into my clinic with pain written all over her face. She didn't come alone. Her son and little grandson helped her in one careful step at a time, like she was walking on broken glass. Her blouse was wrinkled from sitting too long. She couldn't sit still, constantly shifting, searching for some position that hurt just a little less. I asked, "How long have you been in this kind of pain?" She looked at me and softly said, "3 years, doctor. It's been 3 years since I felt like myself." 3 years. Not just time on a calendar, but 3 years of restless sleep. 3 years of not being able to stand too long or walk too far. 3 years of being afraid to pick up her grandchild, because just bending down could send a knife-like pain shooting through her lower back. She had been diagnosed with a disc herniation, L5-S1. She was already scheduled for surgery, but then she backed out. She told me, "I just don't believe that cutting into my back is the only way I'll walk again." And Maria isn't the only one. I've met hundreds of people like her, carrying silent, stubborn back pain for years, misdiagnosed, mistreated, or worse, not believed. And yet, they're the ones who often can recover. If someone touches the right spot, sees the full picture, and believes in their body one more time. In today's video, I want to take you on Maria's journey, from unbearable pain to the moment she finally stood up and walked again, without anyone holding her hand. This isn't just her story. It could be yours, or your mother's, your loved ones, or even your story 5 years from now. Because sometimes, pain doesn't come from weakness. It comes from neglect, from not listening for far too long. So stay with me, because today's video might be the first time you truly understand what's really behind the back pain you've been living with for years. You know, some types of pain don't scream. They don't make you cry out or rush to the ER in the middle of the night. They just quietly show up every morning, silently stopping you from tying your shoes, reaching up to the top shelf, or bending down to pick up something off the floor. Quietly making you give up long walks, dinner gatherings with friends, or even the joy of hugging your grandchild without fear. I call it the silent pain. For many people, it's a dull ache in the lower back. Not sharp, not unbearable, just always there, like a quiet reminder whispering your body isn't what it used to be. That kind of pain doesn't make you cry, but it lingers long enough to make you feel confused, worried, and start living in discomfort. And you don't tell anyone. You think it's just age. You tell yourself, "I'll get through it. Just give it some time." And day after day, you ignore it. I remember one of my patients, Mr. Charles, 68 years old, a retired high school teacher. Tall, skinny, lived alone, and absolutely loved gardening. He didn't come to see me for back pain. He came because he couldn't bend over to plant his vegetables anymore. He joked, "Doc, I can't grow my carrots anymore. Every time I bend down, it feels like someone's yanking me backward." It wasn't until I examined him more carefully that I realized he had a slight nerve compression in his L5, affecting the nerves in his hips and legs. But here's what struck me the most. He had lived with that pain for 4 years. No doctor, no therapy, no complaints. I asked him, "Why didn't you come in sooner?" He just smiled and said, "I figured I'm old. Isn't back pain just part of the deal?" Mr. Charles's story and Maria's, the woman I mentioned earlier, they're not rare. Here in the US, millions of people over 50 are quietly living with back pain, hip pain, leg pain, not realizing that it might be a sign of something more serious. A tight muscle, a misaligned vertebra, a pinched nerve, or just one small habit done the wrong way for many years. So let me ask you this. When was the last time your back didn't feel right? And what did you do about it? Did you listen to your body, or Did you brush it off like Mr. Charles? Here's the small lesson I want to leave you with today. The quieter the pain, the easier it is to ignore. But often it's the things we ignore that slowly steal the quality of our life, one little piece at a time. Pain doesn't have to be dramatic to change the way you live. It just needs to stay long enough to make you live less. Less movement, less confidence, less freedom. And someday, when you finally decide you've had enough, when you want to stand tall again and take your life back, you'll need to ask, where is this pain really coming from? Is it just old age, or was something missed? Misdiagnosed? Misunderstood? That's what we're going to explore next in the next chapter, misdiagnosed or misunderstood, when pain is mistaken right from the start. You know, in today's modern medical world, the most dangerous thing isn't always a wrong diagnosis. Sometimes it's a diagnosis that doesn't go deep enough. I've seen so many patients walk into my clinic with a label already in hand: L4, L5, herniated disc, spinal degeneration, hip arthritis, compressed sciatic nerve. Each one of them holding on to these medical terms like a life sentence, believing that every bit of pain, every limitation, every struggle they face must be because of that name. But after a closer look, after better questions, and deeper listening, I often find that the diagnosis isn't wrong. It's just misunderstood. Let me give you an example. A woman in her 60s came to me with an MRI result showing a mild disc herniation in her lower back. She had been prescribed medications, a back brace, and told to limit her movement. 3 months later, not only was she not better, she was worse. The pain had spread down her leg. She couldn't stand up on her own anymore. When I checked her pelvic alignment, I discovered something no one had noticed. Her pelvis had rotated forward on one side, throwing her entire hip and lower back out of balance. Here's the thing. The MRI didn't show that. No one had ever actually touched or tested how her hips were moving. Now, don't get me wrong, MRIs and imaging tests are valuable, but they don't tell the full story. They're like a snapshot, a still photograph. They capture one moment in time, but they don't show you what happens when you walk, bend, twist, or sit. And that's how misunderstandings become long-term struggles that silently settle into your body. I'll never forget Mr. Edward, a man who had back surgery 6 years ago. But the pain, it never left. He started to believe he was a failed case, that something had gone wrong and couldn't be fixed. Only later did we discover that the ligaments in his left hip had shortened and his right knee muscles were weak. Suddenly the puzzle started to make sense. Sometimes, the cause of your back pain isn't even in your back. It could be your feet, your knees, your hips, even the way you breathe, sleep, or walk every single day. So if you've ever been told you have a disc issue or arthritis, let me ask you this. Has anyone ever truly watched the way you walk? Has anyone looked at how you sit, how you bend, how you twist? Has anyone ever put their hands on your hips and checked your movement piece by piece? Or was it all based on a few words, printed in black and white? Here's the small but powerful lesson. Don't just chase a name for your pain. Chase the true cause behind it, because what's hurting you might not be where the pain shows up. And if we only treat the symptom, we might be missing the real cry for help your body's been trying to send. But here's the beauty. When we start to look deeper, when we start to really listen, the body begins to respond. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be understood. So, if aging isn't the full story, and a diagnosis isn't always the final answer, where do we begin? That's what I want to explore with you in the next part. Therapy fatigue, when treatment becomes its own burden. Why so many people go through all the right steps and still don't heal. You know, there's something people don't often talk about. Sometimes it's not the pain that wears you down the most. It's the treatment. I call it therapy fatigue. You go to appointments. You take the meds. You try physical therapy, acupuncture adjustments, laser sessions, hot packs, all of it. Twice a week, month after month. And still, you find yourself asking, why am I still in pain? I remember one patient of mine, her name was Linda. She was 64 years old and had been a nurse for over 30 years. She looked me in the eye and said, "Doctor, I've tried everything. Yoga, Pilates, acupuncture, even one of those vibrating massage machines. But nothing has helped me stand up straight again or walk comfortably like I used to." She knew more spinal stretches than I did, but oddly enough, the more she tried, the more afraid she became. Afraid of new pain. Afraid to try anything different. And slowly, she began to lose faith in her body's ability to heal. You see, when treatment becomes just another routine, when there's no more hope, no more connection, it becomes a mental burden. You start going to therapy like you go to the dentist. Not to heal, but because you shouldn't miss it. Now, don't get me wrong, I believe in modern therapies. They have tremendous value. But when treatment lacks listening, lacks personalization, lacks empathy, it's like knocking on a locked door when no one's home. What matters isn't how many things you've tried, it's whether your body has truly been understood. Has your pain ever been fully seen or just scribbled into a few lines on a medical chart? I asked Linda one simple question. In all these years of therapy, has anyone ever placed a hand on your pelvis and actually checked each movement carefully? She went silent, then quietly shook her head. And that's when we started over, not the therapy plan, not the exercises, but her trust. Her trust that her body still had the potential to recover. Her belief that she hadn't missed her last chance. Her faith that pain wasn't a life sentence. So here's today's small lesson. More isn't always better. What you need may not be a new therapy, but someone who's willing to listen to your pain the right way. So if you're stuck in treatment and still not getting better, if you're doing everything by the book, but feel no real change, maybe what you're missing is a turning point. Someone who sees your body through a different lens. A method that doesn't just fix your back, but reawakens your whole movement system, the one that's been asleep for too long. And that, my friend, brings us to the next part of this journey, the turning point. The moment things begin to shift, where everything starts to change, with one simple, well-timed touch. There are moments in life, they're not dramatic. They don't come with music or applause. They just happen quietly. You touch the right spot, and suddenly everything begins to shift. I call it the turning point. For Maria, the woman I told you about at the beginning of this video, that turning point came on a quiet Monday morning, in a small room, just her, me, and a padded mat on the floor. She had already gone through over 3 years of therapy, 12 months of waiting for surgery, and a long, exhausting journey of treatment without change. But that day I didn't start with exercises. I didn't ask what medications she was on. I simply looked at her and said, "Do you still believe that your body has a chance to heal?" You see, the magic didn't come from some fancy technique. It came from the moment she started believing in herself again. I began with a simple test. Gently lifted her leg, observed her hip rotation. Pressed gently on her pelvis, watched how her body responded. I wasn't in a rush. Because when someone's been in pain for too long, the first step isn't to push harder. It's to touch the right place the right way. Every small stretch, every slight rotation wasn't meant to fix her. It was meant to wake up the joints that had been asleep for years. You know, our bodies are like forgotten songs. When the pain lasts too long, they forget how to move, how to dance. And sometimes all it takes is someone with enough patience to gently press each note until the music slowly comes back, even if it's a little out of tune at first. I still remember the sound she made, but it wasn't pain. It was surprise. Surprise that after 3 long years, her body was finally responding. And from that moment on, things began to soften. Her muscles relaxed. Her fear of pain started to fade. Her turning point didn't come from a pill or a powerful injection. It came from a well-placed touch and a small flame of trust that started to glow again. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you truly believed your body could get better? Do you still believe that with the right person, the right method, and the right moment, you could walk freely again? Because here's the small lesson in this chapter. Recovery isn't a war. It's a gentle conversation between you and your body. And sometimes all it takes is one person to listen and guide you the right way. And once your body starts to wake up again, you'll realize this. What you need isn't brute strength. What you need is harmony, a smooth coordination between joints, muscles, ligaments, and even your breath. Which brings us to the next part of this journey. Pain is real, and so is fear. Because some pain doesn't live in the back, it lives in the memory. You know, I believe it's not always pain that brings people down. It's the fear that comes with it. I've met so many patients. When I ask where does it hurt, they'll point to their back or their hip or their leg. But when I ask when was the last time you bent down without being afraid, they go silent. Because the truth is, physical pain is just the first bullet. But it's the fear of repeating that pain that leaves the deepest wound. I remember a man named Miguel, 71 years old, former auto mechanic. Strong build, big hands, broad shoulders. He used to carry 60-pound transmissions like they were nothing. But the day he came to see me, he whispered, "I don't dare to bend down, doctor. I'm afraid it'll hurt like before." He wasn't in pain that day, but he was still hurting in his memory. Every time he tried to bend, his brain flashed back to the last time it hurt, and his whole body would tighten as if bracing for an attack. Science calls this pain memory. Our brain holds on to pain like it holds on to the memory of a car crash, a bad fall, or a broken heart. And when we fear pain, our body reacts as if the pain is happening, even if nothing is actually wrong in that moment. You see, pain is real, but fear of pain is just as real. I once asked Miguel, if I promised you it wouldn't hurt, would you try bending again? He looked at me, silent, then exhaled softly. I want to believe you. But doctor, when you've been hurt enough times, even trust starts to wear down like an old knee. That's when I realized what I needed to help him with wasn't just his joints or his muscles. I needed to restore the trust that fear had worn away. So we began by simply sitting, just sitting, breathing, relaxing, and then slowly, gently, we leaned forward, bit by bit. No pushing, no forcing, just letting the body and the mind get to know each other again. Sometimes he still let out an ah, but then he laughed, because he realized it didn't hurt like I thought it would. And that was the real turning point. Not when the pain went away, but when the fear did. Let me ask you something. Is there something you've been afraid to do again? Because you're scared it might hurt like last time. Maybe it's bending down. Maybe it's walking for more than 10 minutes. Maybe it's standing up without holding on to something. If so, I want you to remember, you're not just carrying a body in pain. You're carrying a memory of pain. And here's the small lesson from this part. Healing isn't just about fixing tissues and muscles. It's about dissolving fear, breath by breath, step by step, moment by moment. And when fear begins to fade, when you realize you can try again, move again, trust again, that's when healing becomes complete in body and in soul. And that leads us into the next part of this journey, faith and function, the power of belief. Because at the end of the day, your body can only function at its best when it's fueled by hope. You know, I have this belief that the human body, no matter how old, always holds on to some ability to heal. It might be small, it might be fragile, but it's never zero. And the strange thing is, the people who've been in pain the longest, the ones who almost gave up hope, are often the ones who bounce back the strongest. If they find one thing that sounds so simple, faith. Have you noticed this? When we believe that we can get better, we stand up differently. We breathe differently. We walk differently. Even the eyes, the face, they light up a little more. Not because the pain is gone, but because deep inside a little fire has been lit. A quiet whisper saying, I still have a chance. I remember Janet, 66 years old, a widow, living alone. She once said to me in a steady but soft voice, I don't want to be the woman in the wheelchair just because I was afraid of pain. She had spent years shrinking, not just her muscles, but her spirit too. But one day she showed up at my clinic. Not because someone brought her. She came on her own. And when I asked, what made you decide to come today? She replied, I read something. It said, if you don't believe your body can get better, you've already signed your own sentence. And I realized I needed to do something before it was too late. You see, not all healing begins with an exercise. Sometimes it begins with a decision, a deeply personal moment when you say to yourself, I'm not done yet. Modern science is starting to back this up too. Studies on the placebo effect, where people feel better just because they believe they're getting treatment, have shown that belief alone can trigger real changes in the brain. It can release endorphins. It can reduce pain. No pills, just hope. And I truly believe for people over 50, faith becomes even more precious. Because by now, you've lived enough years to know you don't need flashy promises. You just need something real, a real person, a real method, and a real feeling inside that says, my body is still alive, and I still want to move forward. So if you're still listening to me right now, I want to ask you this. Do you still believe in your body? Do you still believe that someday you'll walk again without having to hold on? Would you dare to begin again with just one small belief? I'm not finished yet. Here's the small lesson in this part. Function only comes when faith is present. No engine runs without fuel. And for your body, faith is the first fuel. And when you start to believe, you'll start to act. But acting the right way is very different from trying everything. Because the truth is, there are a few common mistakes people make. Things they think are helping their back, but are actually making things worse. So let's move into the next part together. Common mistakes, the everyday habits that slow down your healing. Let's make sure you're not accidentally holding yourself back when you're just trying to get better. When we talk about back pain recovery, most people think of pills, pain patches, back braces, or maybe some fancy physical therapy center. And to be clear, I'm not saying those things don't help. They can help if used the right way. But here's the tricky part. Sometimes the very things you do to get better can actually slow your healing down. I've seen hundreds of people stuck in this loop, all because of a few common mistakes, habits they thought were right, simply because everyone else was doing it. So today, I want to walk you through the 4 most common mistakes I see. Waiting until the pain gets unbearable before asking for help. So many people wait until they can't stand, can't sleep, can't even bend down before seeing a doctor. They tell themselves it'll go away in a few days, or I can tough it out. But pain that lasts doesn't just disappear. The longer you wait, the more your body starts compensating the wrong way, leading to bad posture, weak muscles, joint misalignment, even loss of feeling. I had a patient named Paul, 62 years old. He had mild back pain for 2 years, but ignored it. By the time he came in, he couldn't sit in a car for more than 10 minutes. One of his nerves had been compressed so long he'd lost sensation in one leg. Sound familiar? Relying only on pills and back braces to manage the pain. Pain meds aren't the enemy if they're used properly. But they don't treat the cause. They only make you not feel the pain, which doesn't mean your body is actually okay. I once met a woman who took 3 different medications every day and still couldn't sleep because of the dull aching in her back. And back braces. They're meant to help short-term, not be a lifelong crutch. They might help you stand longer today. But if you rely on them too much, your core muscles weaken, and you'll always need the brace just to get through the day. Doing the wrong exercises or the right ones at the wrong time. Not every video on the internet is made for your body. And just because someone says yoga cures back pain doesn't mean it's right for your back. I once saw an elderly man follow a YouTube routine called Stretch to relieve back pain without knowing he had a spinal instability. One wrong twist, and he ended up in the hospital. Now don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of exercise, but it has to be the right movement at the right time for the right person, focusing only on the back while ignoring your hips, knees, and feet. The body is one connected chain. Your back doesn't just hurt for no reason, it reacts to what's happening elsewhere. If your hips are off balance, your spine tilts to compensate. If your step is off, your lower back absorbs the shock. I once helped someone with 5 years of chronic back pain, only to find out the real problem was weak glutes and flat feet. Let me ask you something. Are you doing things that feel helpful, but may actually be slowing down your healing? Here's the small lesson in this part. Recovering from pain isn't about doing more. It's about doing what your body actually needs. And sometimes the most powerful move is to pause, reassess, and begin again, starting from the places you've forgotten, like the pelvis. Yes, the pelvis. That quiet, overlooked area that links your upper and lower body, absorbing pressure every time you walk, sit, or stand. Most people never think about it until it's stiff, or tilted, or misaligned. And that is what I want to explore with you in the next part, the hidden power of the pelvis, where true movement begins. Let's go there together. You know, we often don't realize it, but every single movement we make, walking, sitting, turning, starts from a place most people rarely talk about. Not the back, not the knees, but the pelvis. The pelvis is like the central hub of your body. It sits right where the upper and lower halves meet, supporting your spine, holding your internal organs in place, and serving as the crossroads where major muscle groups connect, like your hips, lower back, glutes, and thighs. But here's the sad part. In most back pain treatments, the pelvis is completely overlooked. I once asked a patient, when your doctor talked to you about your spine, did anyone ever check your pelvis? He shook his head. For 2 years, he focused only on his back-stretching core training using support belts. But what he didn't realize was that his pelvis had rotated just slightly to one side, which forced his spine to curve in compensation, creating uneven pressure on his discs. I often joke with my patients, you can fix the roof, but if the foundation is tilted, the whole house still leans. And the pelvis, that's your foundation. There was a retired teacher named Sylvia. She came to see me after 4 years of low back pain that radiated into her hips. She walked with a limp, and her legs would go numb after sitting too long. She had been diagnosed with arthritis, tried injections, did rounds of physical therapy, but nothing helped. When I examined her, I found her pelvic joint was slightly locked on one side. This caused her entire spine to shift to the opposite side like a bamboo stalk bent by wind. After just a few gentle adjustments and pelvic-focused exercises, Sylvia started noticing real change. Less tension in her back, more balanced steps, and that strange feeling of being off-center was finally gone. You see, sometimes the area that needs adjusting isn't where you feel pain, it's where you've never even looked. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you had your pelvis checked, not by a machine, but by someone who actually moved it, felt it, assessed its motion? If your answer is never, you might be living with a tilted foundation and not even know it. Here's the small lesson in this part. If you want a healthy back, don't start with the back. Start with the base, the place where all movement begins. Because only when this pelvis is balanced and mobile can the rest of your body truly breathe with each step you take. And the good news is, you don't need a fancy gym. You don't need expensive equipment. All you need is a soft mat, a few gentle exercises, and just 5 minutes a day to reconnect with your body from the ground up. In the next part, I'll walk you through a simple daily routine to help you recover and maintain your body even after the pain is gone. That's the next chapter beyond recovery, when healing doesn't stop at pain-free. Because healing isn't just about not hurting anymore. It's about living fully the way you always hoped to. So many people come to me and say, "Doctor, I just want the pain to go away." I'm not asking for much, I just want to walk normally again. And I get it. When you've lived with chronic pain for long enough, you start lowering your expectations for life. Just hurting a little less than yesterday feels like a win. But you know what? Getting rid of the pain, that's not recovery. That's just step one. True recovery isn't just not feeling pain anymore. It's about living again with joy, with freedom, with confidence, and with all the little things you thought you had to give up. I remember Maria, the woman I mentioned earlier in this video. After 3 years of wincing every time she stood up, after dozens of prescriptions and advice from every direction, she finally squatted down in her garden to water the plants. And do you know what moved her the most? It wasn't that her back no longer hurt. It was that for the first time in years, she could pick up her granddaughter by herself without fear, without bracing, without asking for help. I still remember the look in her eyes that day. It wasn't the look of a patient anymore. It was the look of someone who had reclaimed her body. That's why I always tell my patients, don't stop just because the pain is gone. Go further so your body doesn't just feel okay, but feels alive again. A lot of people think that when the pain ends, the journey is over. But the truth is, that's when the real work begins. Now you need to strengthen the muscles that support your spine. Keep your hips and pelvis moving well. Maintain daily movement, even just 10 minutes. And most importantly, avoid falling back into old habits that caused the pain in the first place. I often encourage patients to build a post-recovery ritual like 5 minutes each morning of gentle back stretches and deep breathing. Walking on a flat surface 3 times a week. A monthly check-in on posture and walking patterns. And now and then, just sitting still and listening to your body. Because after age 50, your body is like a beautiful garden. It doesn't need to bloom like it did at 20. But if you care for it, water it, pull the weeds, give it attention, it'll bloom in quiet, lovely ways you never expected. Let me ask you something. Now that the pain is fading, have you thought about starting a new journey with your body? Not to become stronger than everyone else, but to come home to yourself. Fully, freely. Here's the small lesson in this part. The end of pain isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of a new way to live where you are in charge, not fear. And the best part is, you don't have to do this alone. Because in the final part, I'll leave you with a few messages, reminders, and a small gift to help you keep walking strong every single day. That's coming up next. Final message. What I want you to remember. It's not a long section, but I hope it stays with you for a very long time. If you've stayed with me this far in the video, I believe something. You're no longer just a viewer. You're part of this healing story we've been writing together. We've walked through a lot. From quiet pain to misdiagnosed frustration. From treatment fatigue to that first glimpse of recovery. From fear to faith. From common mistakes to the forgotten pelvis. And finally, to the journey of living again, not just pain-free, but fully present. So if there's only one thing I could leave you with today, it would be this: don't let pain, whether it's loud or subtle, become the one steering your life. I know, after 50 things change. Your body doesn't bounce back the way it used to. You lose some abilities you once took for granted. You start hearing words like degeneration, decline, limitations. But please don't let those words make you forget that deep inside there's still a vibrant part of you. A body that hasn't given up on you. And a quiet hope that's just waiting to be woken up. I once said to an older gentleman, he smiled gently and replied, I don't need to be as strong as I was at 20. I just want to walk to the park, sit down without bracing for pain, and stand up without needing someone to pull me up. You see, healing isn't about becoming powerful. It's about returning to life's simple things freely. So if there's ever a day when you feel tired, or you find yourself wondering, is it too late to start again? I hope you'll remember this. You are not too late. Your body is not broken. And your life is not just meant for surviving. Here's the final small lesson I want to share. Sometimes the only thing you truly need isn't a miracle method. It's the quiet belief that you still deserve to live comfortably even after 60. And if this video helped you see things a little differently about your body, your pain, or yourself, then I believe your healing has already begun. If any part of this journey touched you, please share it with someone you care about. Who knows, it might be exactly what they needed to hear today. And if you'd like to keep learning how to care for your body gently, safely, without medication, I invite you to subscribe to this channel so I can keep walking with you step by step. Thank you for listening. I'm Ethan, and I still believe this. The human body, when understood and cared for, will always find its way to healing. Wishing you a peaceful day. And if you can, go ahead and stand up. Stretch your back a little and start again with just one small step.